So welcome back to the channel, guys. So this was my submission for Benny's Spooky Edit War. This time around there won't be a speed art. I actually thought of creating a speed art, but what happened is that I started and I had to change a lot of concepts to get to this. And because of that, it took a lot of time and I just didn't think it was a good idea to record the whole process. It took me like 8 hours or something over the course of a week to finish this, so I don't want to mislead you or anything. This is not going to be a tutorial or an in-depth breakdown. This is just going to be an explainer video about how I created this. Alright then, so let's get straight into it. I grouped all the layers into just one group here, and as I open it, you can see that I have color coded them. Not all of them are color coded, but I try to color code most of them. So I'm going to try to explain what they are and how I went through the process of editing them. And if you noticed already, you know what, let me show you something. So if I add one more layer here, it becomes layer 703, which means that I added more than 700 layers in this. Which is quite crazy because I don't even know how I ended up on that number. But anyway, I'll show you how I created the background. So basically, these elements that you see here were not added one step after the other. Some of these things like the lightning bolt, the moon, there's a mountain over here. These are background elements that I grouped together for the purpose of explanation, and these were actually added in between edits, if that makes sense. So if I make them invisible, you can see the original stock image that Benny provided. So this is one of the stock images of the sky that was available. So I started off with the sky image and I reduced its exposure and also reduced the lightness of it to make the sky a little bit dimmer. These elements that you see here, they don't make much sense now, but it will make sense once everything comes along. And as you can see, I color coded most of the layers here. Like for instance, the blue represents the fog. And as you may have noticed already, there are a lot of blue layers here, which means that I added plenty of fog all the way through. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. So to get that green atmospheric look, I added a green gradient, which is this layer over here. Yeah, there we have it. So that's the background done. Now moving on from the background, I'll show you how I created the ground. And we go all the way up here. And this green color represents the ground. And it looks a bit weird now because this is not the original stock image. Let me quickly grab the original image. Alright, so here we got the original image. And what I did here is that I selected just the ground and I did not use this building at all. I only used the graves and the ground from this image. Parts of the ground were pieced together from scratch. So these are sections that I selected and I layered one on top of the other to kind of create this look. It looks untidy now, but trust me, in the end everything will just fall in place. And as you may have noticed already, my editing process is quite chaotic and that's why I can't go about explaining every little detail. It's just going to take a long time and it'll really be hectic. So anyway, after I pieced everything together, I added a few exposure layers and then a color balance layer. You don't really need to add multiple exposure layers, but sometimes I like to work on multiple adjustment layers rather than just one, so that I don't have to change the values of the initial exposure layer. It's not necessary, but I quite often end up doing that and I don't know why. Maybe I should start working on fewer adjustment layers. I don't know, but anyway, that's what I did here. Now I'm gonna make these layers visible again and that's the ground pretty much done. And after that, to finish up the process, I added the gravestones, which are color coded as gray. So I got one over here and another one over here and another one over here. And for the gravestones, I kind of used the same adjustment layers from before so that the color and the lighting matched. And I did the same thing here for the cross as well. If I go here and make these adjustment layers invisible, you can see that it goes back to the original stock image. So that's what I did to match the colors and lighting, but like I said before, these steps are not in any particular order, so these gravestones were in fact some of the last elements that I added to the image. And after that I added the pumpkins, which I'm gonna explain now. Just like before, I used similar adjustment layers like exposure layers and hue saturation adjustment layers to match the color and lighting of the pumpkins to the environment. And for this orange light that you see that's emanating from within the pumpkin, all I did is poke some holes in the shape of this face using a layer mask. And then I added some orange color underneath it. And I did the same process with all the other pumpkins and it kinda worked out quite nicely. And now I'm going to add the main subject of this edit, which is the spooky house. Alright, so there's a lot going on here, but to summarize, I used plenty of adjustment layers to match the color, lighting, etc. of this house with the environment. And this light beam that you see over here was created entirely from this stock image. So what I did is that I added a hue saturation adjustment layer to this and I warped it to make it look like a beam of light. And yeah, that was pretty much it. And as you can see, if I make this hue saturation adjustment layer invisible, it'll go back to its original color. So basically I could have gone for any color, but I thought this color was really complementary to the environment. So that's why I went with this color. And the debris that you see here were created by cropping out bits and pieces of the house, and I kinda put it together to make it seem as if the debris was flying away with the light beam. And for the windows, I erased out the shape of the windows using a layer mask and I added a layer behind them and added purple color so that it matched with the light beam. I could have gone with any color just like I said before, but I felt like purple was the one to go with. So yeah, that's the house pretty much done. And like I said before, I did add some exposure layers and hue saturation adjustment layers, and I also added some basic lighting here and there to kind of make the house blend in with the environment.
Much later.
Alright then, so moving on from this house, the next thing that I added are the towers, and they were constructed from this exact same image. So I used bits and pieces of this house to make these towers from scratch. And just like before, I used the same adjustment layers that I used on this house on these towers so that the lighting and the color of the towers matched with that of the house. And as you may have noticed already, some of the shapes are a bit crooked, so I achieved it by using the puppet warp and the perspective warp. It was pretty easy to do and it took some time, but it was pretty fun. And after that, I reduced the opacity of the individual towers to get that depth of field. So some of these towers that are out there in the back, the opacity of these layers are like around 50% or less. And after that, I added the background hills, which by the way were made from the exact same stock image that I used to make the ground. So the hills that I got here, I color coded them as green and now I'm gonna add them one by one. And then I went on to add more towers. The image looked pretty decent now, but I thought it could do well with more elements and that's exactly what I did. So I added more stuff cause
Why not?
And just like the towers over here, this fence was also put together from this exact same stock image. So basically bits and pieces of this house went into making this fence as well. And also I used similar adjustment layers from before. And finally I put the pumpkin truck over here. And at this point all there was left to do was add the fog and the particles and some extra lighting as well. So I went on and did that. And all this atmospheric fog that you see here was created using one of the stock images and a standard soft rounded brush. And then I added the particles. And after that I added some extra effects to enhance the image. And in the end I added the ghosts. And in order to make the ghosts glow, I turned the layer blend mode to color dodge, and I also reduced the opacity of the layers as well to make the ghosts translucent. And finally, on top of everything, I added a vibrance adjustment layer to make the colors pop. And that's pretty much it. And guys, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and comment, and also consider subscribing.